cats in the dark. They'll be on top of you, kicking in the doors before your boys raise a shout. We do what we can, Lan barked. Stop trying to frighten us. There are children listening. Lord Luke at least offers helpful suggestions. He was at my place the day before the Trollocs came, seeing I had everybody placed properly. Blood and ashes. If not for him, the Trollocs would have killed us all. Luke did not seem to hear the praise offered him. He was watching Perrin cautiously while fussing with his gauntlets, tucking them behind the golden wolf's head buckle of his sword belt. Faile was watching him too, with a slight frown. He ignored her. I thought a white cloak saved you, Master Lewis. I thought a white cloak patrol arrived in the nick of time and drove the Trollocs off. Well, they did. Lan scrubbed a hand through his gray hair. But Lord Luke, if the white cloaks hadn't come, we could have... At least he doesn't try to frighten us, he muttered. So he doesn't frighten you, Perrin said. Trollocs frighten me. The white cloaks keep the Trollocs free when they can. You want to credit the white cloaks. Luke fixed Perrin with a cold stare as if pouncing on a weakness. Who do you think is responsible for the dragon's fangs scribbled on people's doors? Oh, their hands never hold charcoal, but they're behind it. They stalk into these good people's homes, asking questions and demanding answers, as if it were their own roof overhead. I say these people are their own masters, not dogs for white cloaks to call to heel. Let them patrol the countryside, well and good. But meet them at the door and tell them whose land they are on. That is what I say. If you want to be a white cloak dog, be so. But do not begrudge these good people their freedom. Perrin met Luke's eyes, stare for stare. I hold no affection for white cloaks. They want to hang me, or hadn't you heard? The tall lord blinked as though he had not, or maybe had forgotten in his eagerness to spring. Exactly what is it you do propose, then? Perrin turned his back on the man and went to stand in front of the fireplace. He did not mean to argue with Luke. Let everyone listen. They were certainly all looking at him. He would say what he thought and be done with it. You have to depend on the white cloaks. Have to hope they'll keep the Trollocs down. Hope they'll come in time if the Trollocs attack. Why? Because every man tries to hang on to his farm, if he can, or to stay as close to it as possible if he can't. You're in 100 little clusters like grapes ripe for picking. As long as you are, as long as you have to pray the white cloaks can keep the Trollocs from stomping you into one, you've no choice but to let them ask any question they want. Demand any answers they want. You have to stand by and watch innocent people hauled off. Or does anyone here think Harl and Alsbeth Luhhan are dark friends? Natty Cawthon, Bodwin, and Eldrin? Abel's stare around the room dared anyone to hint at a yes, but there was no need. Even Adina Luan's attention was on Perrin. Luke frowned at him between studying the reactions of the people crowding the room. I know they shouldn't have arrested Natty and Alsbeth and all, Wood said, but that's over. He gave Abel a troubled look. Except for getting them to let everybody go, I mean. They haven't arrested anyone since that I've heard. You think that means it's done? Perrin said. Do you really think they'll be satisfied with the Cawthons and the Luhhans? With 2 farms burned, which of you will be next? The wrong thing, or just to make it? It could be white cloaks putting a torch to this house instead of Trollocs.
Hey, Grandpa, how you doing, bro?
Scrolled on your door some night.
Hope you're doing good.
Folk who believe that kind of thing. A number of eyes darted to Adina, who shifted her feet and hunched her shoulders. Even if all it means is having to tug your forelock to every white cloak who comes along, you want to live that way? Your children. You're at the mercy of the Trollocs, the mercy of the white cloaks, and everybody with a grudge. As long as one rolls on you, all three do. You're hiding in the cellar, hoping one rat will protect you from another, hoping the rats don't sneak out in the dark and bite you. Jack
I think you're the old one there, Grandpa.
With the other men in the room, then said slowly, "If you think we're doing wrong, what
See,
is it
there's
you
still
suggest?"
there's not a head full of white hair.
Aaron was not expecting the question. He was sure they would get angry. But he went right on telling them what he thought. Gather your people. Gather your sheep and your cows, your chickens, everything. Gather them up. Keep them that might be safe. Go to Emmons Field, or Watch Hill since it's closer. That'll put you right into the White Cloak's eyes. As long as it's 20 people here and 50 there, you are game for Trolloc taking. If there are hundreds of you together, you have a chance. And one that doesn't depend on bowing your necks for the White Cloaks. That brought the explosion he expected. "Abandon my farm completely," Flan shouted right on top of Wits. "You're mad." Words poured out on top of one another from them and from brothers and cousins. "Go off to Emmons Field. I'm too far away to do more than check the fields every day right now. The weeds will take everything. I don't know how I'm going to harvest as it is. If the rains come, trying to rebuild the box lot. Have to leave the clip."
Oh, yeah, appreciate it,
Aaron's
Grandpa.
fist smacking the lintel of the fireplace cut them short. "I haven't seen a field trampled
I
on
still-
fire or
I
a
still got a
house
lot of
or
just
barn burned unless there were people
Choose
there.
to cut it.
It's people the Trollocs come for. And if they burn it anyway, a new crop can be
Now
planted.
you have a great night too, Grandpa.
Stone and mortar and wood can be rebuilt. Can you rebuild that?" He pointed at Lila's baby, and she clutched the child to her breast, glaring at him as though he had threatened the babe himself. The looks she gave her husband and Flan were frightened, though. An uneasy murmur rose. "Leave," Jack muttered, shaking his head. "I don't know, Perrin. It is your choice, Master Orsine. The land will still be here when you come back. Trollocs can't carry that off. The same can be said for you." The murmur grew to a buzz. A number of women were confronting their husbands, mostly those with a child or two in tow. None of the men seemed to be arguing. An interesting turn.
From when I smoked last night in my live and what I've smoked today,
From his face, there was no
I took it
telling
down.
he approved of it. "I
There
shall
you go.
watch to see how it turns out.
A little
And
bit.
now, Master Orsine, I must be on my way. I only stopped to see how you were doing." Jack and Eliza saw him to the door. The others were too busy with their own discussions to pay much attention. Perrin had the feeling his departures were usually as grand as his arrivals. Jack came from the door to Perrin. "Bold plan you have. I will admit I'm not keen on abandoning my farm, but you talk sense. I don't know what the children will make of it, though. They seem a suspicious lot to me. They might think we're all plotting something against them if we gather together." "Let them think it," Perrin said. "A village full of people can take Luke's advice and tell them to be about their business elsewhere.
Hey, running bear.
Do you think it's better to stay vulnerable
I'm
just
smoking
White
some
Cloak's goodwill,
white gummy.
such as it is?" Oh, I see your point. You've convinced me. And everybody else, too, it seems. It did appear to be true. The murmur of discussion was dying down. Everyone looked to be in agreement. Even Adina, who was marshaling her daughters with loud orders for packing immediately. She actually gave a genuinely approving nod. "When do you mean to go?" Perrin asked Jack. "As soon as I can get everybody ready. We can make John Galen's place on the North Road before sunset. I'll tell John what you say, and everybody down by Emmons Field. Better there than Watch Hill. If we mean to be out from under the White Cloak's thumb, as well as the Trollocs, best not to sit under their noses." Jack scratched his narrow fringe of hair with one finger. "Perrin,
Oh, shit.
I don't think the children would actually hurt Natty Coffin. If they do think we're What?
You don't taste too bad. I like it.
I mean to get them free as soon as I can.
Nice
Master
little
Alcine.
2-gram
Anybody else
cart.
at White Cloak's arrest, for that matter. Old plan, Jack repeated. Well, I had better get people moving. If I'm going to have us
Rechargeable.
by sundown. Go with the light, Baron. A very bold plan, Baron said, coming up as Master Alcine hurried off, calling orders for wagons to be hauled out and people to... She studied Baron interestedly, head tilted to one side, but no less so than Fail at her side. Fail looked as though she had never seen him before. I don't know why everybody keeps calling it that, he said. A plan, I mean. That Luke was talking nonsense. Defying White Cloaks in the door. Boys on the roof to watch for Trollocs. A couple of open gates to disaster. All I did was point it out. They should have left me alone from the start. That man... He stopped himself from saying that. Not with Fail there. She might misunderstand. Of course, he said smoothly. I haven't had an opportunity to see it work before this. Or perhaps I have and did not know it. What are you talking about? See what work? Harry, people were ready to pull down here at all costs. You gave them good sense and strong emotion. But do you think the same from me would have shifted them? Or from Tam or Abel? Of any of us? You should know how stubborn Two Rivers people can be. You have altered the course events would have followed in the Two Rivers without you. A few words spoken in irritation. Tabirin do pull other people's lives into their own pattern. Fascinating. I do hope I have an opportunity to observe Ren again. Whatever it is, Baron muttered, it's to the good. The more people together in one place, the safer. Of course. Rand does have the sword, I take it. He frowned, but there was no reason not to tell her. She knew about Rand, and she knew what Tyr had to mean. He does.
Shit.
Watch yourself with Alana, Baron.
Hey,
What?
Troy, how you doing?
The Aes Sedai's quick changes of topic were beginning to confuse him, especially when she started telling him what she had already thought of and thought to keep secret from her. Why? Barrett's face did not change, but her dark eyes were suddenly bird bright and sharp. There are many designs in them. Not all blatant by far, but sometimes it is difficult to say until it is too late. Even the most benevolent often allow for a few threads snapped in the weaving, a few reeds broken in the basket. It would make a useful reed in any number of possible plans.
Hope you're doing good, Troy.
Just as suddenly she was looking at
Hope everyone's doing good out there tonight.
More at home in a book or her own thoughts than in the real world. Oh my. Master Alcine is not wasting any time, is he? How distant is there someone to fetch our horses? Fail shivered as the brown sister moved away. Sometimes Aes Sedai make me uneasy, she murmured. Uneasy, Baron said. Most of the time they scare me half to death. She laughed softly and began playing with the button on his coat.
No shit, just woke up.
The parents have been a fool. What do you mean? She glanced up at him. She was about to twist the button right off, and he hastily added, You are one of the least foolish people I know. He clamped his teeth shut before he could add, most of the time, and was glad he had when she smiled. That is very nice of you to say, but I was. She patted the coat button and began adjusting his coat, which he did not need, and smoothing his lapels, which they did not need. You are so silly, she said, speaking too fast, just because that young man looked at me. Really, he is much too boyish, not at all like you. Then I thought I would make you jealous, just a little, by pretending to be attracted to Lord Luke. I should not have done it. Will you forgive me? He tried to sort through the jumbled words. It was good she thought Will was boyish. If he tried to grow a beard, it would probably be straggly. But she had not mentioned the way she had returned Will's look. And if she had been pretending to be attracted to Luke, why had she blushed that way? Well, of course I forgive you, he said. A dangerous light appeared in her eyes. I mean, there's nothing to forgive. If anything, the light sparkled.
Probably be an early one today. Maybe.
Forgive me. When I was trying to
Actually,
chase you
a little.
away, I said some things.
For some reason, feel a little more tired and wore out than usual.
You said something.
I didn't really do
She
anything.
said sweetly. And he said, I cannot think what, but I will take it into consideration.
I hang in there.
Into consideration. She sounded very much the noble woman there. Maybe her father was some lord, so she could study the way ladies talked.
This has been
He
helping.
had no idea what she meant. Whenever he found out would be too soon, he was certain.
Don't have nothing to dab, but I got this.
It was a relief to climb back into Stepper's saddle amid the confusion of wagon teams being hitched and people arguing for what they could or could not take, and children chasing down chickens and geese and tying their feet for loading. Boys were already driving the cattle eastward, and others herding the sheep out of the cote. Fail made no reference to what had been said inside. Indeed, she smiled at him and compared the keeping of sheep here to in Saldaia.
Nice.
And when one of the girls brought her a bunch of small red flowers, heart's blush, she tried to thread some of them into his beard, laughing at his efforts to stop her. In short, she had him jumping out of his skin. He needed another talk with Master Coffin. Go ahead, Master Alcine told him again, just as they were ready to ride out. And look after the boys. 4 of the young men had decided to go with them, on rough-coated horses not nearly as good as those Tam and Abel rode. Perrin was not sure why he was the one who was supposed to look after them. They were all older than he, if not by much.
Nice. So it
Well,
actually
Alcine
sounds
was
like it'd be a tasty
his cousin
one.
Van, one of Jack's sons, who had gotten all the nose in that family, and a pair of the Lewins, Tell and Daniel, who looked so much like Flan that they could have been his sons instead of his nephews. Perrin had tried to talk them out of it, especially when they all made it plain that they wanted to help rescue the Coffins and the Luhans from the White Cloaks. They seemed to think it was a matter of riding into the children's camp and demanding everybody's return. Casting down our defiance, Tell called it, nearly made Perrin's hair stand on end. Too many gleemen's tales, too much listening to fools like Luke. He suspected that Will had another reason, so he tried to exist. No one else. Sam and David only seemed to the clothes they carried. Baron merely observed, making notes. Tomas looked. Theo busied herself, plaiting a crown from the heart's blush, which turned out to be for Perrin. Sighing, he draped the middle of his saddle. I will take care of them the best I can, Master Alcine, he promised. A mile from the Alcine farm,
Right, so
lose one or two right there.
this one would definitely do it to you. Try to take too big of one.
Will and his
But definitely has a good flavor to it.
They began knocking arrows. The Aiel had spears ready to cast and their faces veiled. It took some minutes to straighten out. Gaul and the 2 maidens seemed to think it a huge joke when they understood. And that unsettled the Lewins and Alcine as much as finding out that the 3 were Aiel, and 2 of them women. Will essayed to smile at Bane and Chiad, and they exchanged looks and brief nods. Perrin did not know what was going on there, but he decided to let it alone unless Will looked to get his throat cut. Time enough to stop it if one of the Aiel women actually took her knife out. Might teach Will a thing or two about smiling.
Yeah, they definitely got a kick to them.
As quickly as they could. But a mile or so north of the Alcine place, he saw one of the farms that produced those scattered plumes of chimney smoke. Tam was keeping them far enough away that the people around the farmhouse were only shapes. Except to Perrin's eyes. He could see children in the yard. And Jack Alcine was the nearest neighbor. Had been until today. He hesitated, then reined Stepper toward the farm. Not that it was likely to do any good, but he had to try. "What are you doing?" Tam said, "Giving them the same advice I gave Master Alcine. It won't take a minute." Tam nodded, and the others turned with him. Baron was studying Perrin thoughtfully. The Aiel peeled away short of the farm to wait to the north, Gaul running a little apart from the maidens. Perrin did not know the Torfins, nor they him. Yet to their surprise, once the excitement of strangers was past, were staring at Tomas and Baron and Fail. They listened and began hitching horses to 2 wagons and a pair of high-wheeled carts before he and the others rode on. 3 more times he stopped when their route took them near to farmhouses, once in a cluster of 5 close together. It was always the same. The people protested they could not just leave their farms, but each time he left behind a bustle of packing.
I have to do that after I'm done here.
Something else happened, too. He could not stop Will and his cousin, or the Lubins, from talking with the young men on the farms.
Oh, damn.
Their party grew by 13, Torfins and Aldais, Ahans, and Marwings, armed with bows and riding an ill-matched assortment of ponies and plow horses, all eager to rescue the prisoners from the White Cloaks.
I definitely hit you up on Twitter, so
Will and the others from the Alcine farm thought it unfair that he warned
Oh,
them
shit, hell yeah.
spoiling the fun they hoped to have seeing them jump. They jumped more than enough to suit Perrin, and the way they peered at every bush, much less every stand of trees, made it clear that they thought there must be more Aiel about, no matter what he said. At first, Will tried lording it over the Torfins and the rest, on the grounds that he had been the first to join Perrin. One of the first, at least, he admitted when Ban and the Lewins glared at him, while they were latecomers. Perrin put an end to it by dividing them into 2 groups of about the same size, and putting Daniel and Ban each in charge of one. Though there was some grumbling over that, too, in the beginning. The Aldais thought the leaders should be chosen according to age, Billy Aldais being the eldest by a year, while others put forward Hugh Marwyn as the best tracker, and James Torfin as the best shot, while Kenley Ahan had been to Watch Hill often before the White Cloaks came, and would know his way around the village. They all seemed to think it a lark. Tell's phrase about casting defiance was repeated more than once. Finally, Perrin rounded on them in cold anger, forcing everyone to a halt in the grass between 2 copses. "This is not a game, and it isn't a Beltane dance. You do what you're told, or else go back home. I don't know what use you are anyway, and I've no intention of getting killed because you think you know what you are doing. Now line up and shut up. You sound like the women's circle meeting in a wardrobe." They did it, stringing themselves out in 2 columns behind Ban and Daniel. Will and Billy wore disgruntled frowns, but they held whatever objections they had. Fail gave Perrin an approving nod, and so did Tomas. Baron watched it all with a smooth, unreadable face, no doubt thinking she was seeing a Taviran at work. Perrin saw no need to tell her he had just tried to think of what a Shinaran he knew, a soldier named Uno, would have said, though no doubt Uno would have put it in harsher words. Farms began to appear more frequently as they approached Watch Hill, coming in clumps closer together until they ran on continuously, the way they did near Emmons Field. A patchwork of hedged or stone-walled fields separated by narrow lanes, footways, and wagon paths. Even with their pauses at the 4 farms, there was still some daylight left. Still men working their crops, and boys driving sheep and cattle in from pasture for the night. No one would be leaving their animals out these days. Tam suggested Perrin cease warning people, and he reluctantly agreed. They would all head for Watch Hill here, alerting the White Cloaks.
Does your profile picture have a nice little dog on it?
Backways attracted enough eyes.
Sorry.
Most people appeared too busy to do more than glance. It would have to be done sooner or later, though, and the sooner the better. So long as people remained in the countryside, needing White Cloak protection, then the White Cloaks had a foothold in the 2 rivers. They might not want to give up. Perrin kept a sharp eye out for any sign of White Cloak patrols. But except for one dust cloud over toward the North Road, heading south...
I found one on there putting that in. I'm not sure if it's yours, so...
dismount and leave their horses. Afoot,
I said, does your profile picture on there have a picture of a white dog?
Shielded them a little. Tam and Abel knew a thicket that gave a good view of the White Cloak camp, a tangle of oak and sourgum and leaf that covered 3 or 4 hides, little more than a mile south and west of Watch Hill, over an open stretch of ground. They entered from the south, hurrying.
I found you.
And hoped no one had seen them go in. No one to
There
wonder
we go.
why they did not come out and comment on it. Stay here, he told Will and the other young men while they were tying their horses to branches. Keep your bows handy and be ready to run if you hear a shout. Don't move unless you hear me shout. And if anybody makes any noise, I'll pound his head like an anvil. We're here to look, not pull the White Cloaks down on us by tramping around like blind bulls.
Nice.
Fingering their bows nervously, they nodded. Perhaps it was beginning to dawn on them just what they were doing. The Children of the Light might not take kindly to finding 2 Rivers folk riding about in an armed bunch.
Ain't no problem, sir.
Were you ever a soldier? Bayou asked quizzically in a low voice. Some of my father's guards taught them. I'm a blacksmith, Baron laughed. I've just heard soldiers talk. It seems to work, though. Will and Billy were peering about uneasily and hardly daring to move. Creeping from tree to tree, he and Fail followed Tam and Abel to where the Aiel were already crouching near the thicket's north edge. Baron was there too, and Tomas, of course. The brush made a thin screen of leaves, enough to hide them, with no hindrance to observation. The White Cloak encampment stretched out at the foot of Watch Hill like a village itself. Hundreds of men, some armored, moved among long, straight rows of white tents with lines of horses, 5 deep, staked out to east and west. Animals being unsaddled and curried indicated patrols finishing their day, while a double column of maybe 100 mounted men, pristine and precise, trailed off toward the waterwood at a brisk walk, lances all at the same angle. At intervals around the encampment, white-cloaked guards marched up and down, lances shouldered like spears. Burnished helmets flashing in the sinking sun. A rumble came to Perrin's ears. Well to the west, galloping from the direction of Emmons Field, hurrying toward the tents. From the direction he and the others had come. A few minutes slower, and they would have been seen for sure. A horn sounded, and men began moving to the cook fires. Off to one side lay a much smaller camp, its tents set haphazardly. Some sagged against their guy ropes. Whoever stayed there, most were gone now. Only a few horses flicking their tails against flies along a short picket rope indicated that anyone was there at all. Not White Cloaks. The Children of the Light were too rigidly tiny for that camp. Between the thicket and the 2 sets of tents was an expanse of grass and wildflowers. Very likely the local farmers used it for pasture. Not now, however. It was fairly flat land. White Cloaks galloped around to cover it in a minute. Perrin's attention to the large. You see that tent near the river? Standing watch at either end? Perrin nodded. The low sun was slanting.
That's not a good hit there.
You could see well enough. That's where Natty and the girls are, and the Luans. I've seen them come out and go in, one at a time, and always with a guard, even to the latrines. We've tried to sneak in at night 3 times, Tam said. But they keep a tight watch over the perimeter of the camp. We barely got away the last time. It would be like trying to stick your hand into an anthill without being stung. Perrin sat down at the base of a tall leather leaf with his bow across his knees. I want to think on this a while. Master Althor, will you settle Will and that lot down? See, none of them takes it into his head to run for home. Like as not, they'd ride straight for the North Road, not thinking. And we'd have 100 of those White Cloaks over here to investigate. If any of them thought to bring food, you could see they get something to eat. If we have to run, we may spend the rest of the night in the saddle. Abruptly, he realized he was giving orders.
Hell yeah.
Apologized. Tam grinned and said, Aaron, you took charge back at Jack's place. This isn't the first time I've followed a younger man who could see what had to be done. You're doing good, Baron, Abel said before the two older men slipped back into the trees. Perplexed, Baron scratched his beard.
Right.
He had taken charge. Now that he thought of it, neither Tam nor Abel had really made a decision since leaving the Alcine farm. Only offered suggestions and left it to him. Neither had called him lad since then either. Interesting, Baron said. She had her small book out. He wished he could have a chance to read what she had written. You going to caution me about being foolish again? He said. Instead of answering, she said in a meditative voice, it will be even more interesting to see what you do next. I cannot say you are shifting the world on its foundations, as Randolph Thor is, but the Two Rivers is surely moving. I wonder if you have a clue as to where you are moving it. I mean to free the Luhans and the Cothans, he told her angrily. That's it. Except for the Trollocs. He let his head drop back against the bowl of a leather leaf and closed his eyes. All I'm doing is what I have to do. The Two Rivers will stay right where it always has. Of course, Baron said. He heard her moving away, her and Tomas, slipper and boots alike, soft on ground, strewn with last year's leaves. He opened his eyes. Fail was staring after the pair, and not best pleased. She will not leave you alone, she muttered. The plaited crown of heart's blush he had left on her saddle dangled from her hand. I said I never do, he told her. She turned on him with a challenging look. I suppose you mean to try bringing them out tonight? It had to be done now, because he had been passing his warning about, and folks knew who had told them. Maybe the White Cloaks would not hurt their prisoners. Maybe. He trusted White Cloak mercy as far as he could throw a horse. He glanced at Gaul and nodded. Tam Thor and Abel Cawthon will well as Wetlanders. But these White Cloaks are too stiff to see everything that moves in the dark, I think. I think they expect their enemies to come in numbers, where they can be seen. Chiad turned amused gray eyes on the Ayuman. Do you mean to move like wind, then, stone dog? It will be diverting to see a stone dog try to move lightly. When my spear sister and I have rescued the prisoners, perhaps we will go back for you, if you are too old to find your own way. Bane touched her arm, and she looked at the flame-haired woman in surprise. After a moment, she flushed slightly under her tan. Both women shifted their eyes to Fail, who was still watching Perrin, her head up and her arms crossed now. He took a long breath. If he told her he did not want her to come, Bane and Chiad almost certainly would not either. They were still making a point of being with her, not him. Maybe Fail was, too. Perhaps he and Gaul could do it alone, but he could not see how to make her stay if she did not want to. Fail being Fail, she would just as likely sneak after them. You will stay close to me, he said firmly. I want to rescue prisoners, not leave another behind. Laughing, she dropped down beside him, snuggling her shoulder under his arm. Staying close to you sounds a fine idea. She flipped the crown of red flowers onto his head, and Bane chuckled. He rolled his eyes up. He could just see the edge of the thing hanging over his forehead. He must look a fool. He left it there, though. The sun slid down as slowly as a bead in honey. Abel brought some bread and cheese. Over half those would-be heroes had not brought anything to eat after all. And they ate and waited. Night came, lit by a moon already high, but obscured by scurrying clouds. Perrin waited. Lights vanished in the White Cloak camp, and in Watch Hill, too, leaving a sprinkling of glowing windows across the otherwise dark mound. He gathered Tam and Fail and the Aiel around him. Everyone's face was clear to him. Baron stood close enough to listen. Abel and Tomas were with the other Two Rivers folk, keeping them quiet. He felt a little odd giving instructions, so kept them simple. Tam was to have everyone ready to ride the moment Perrin returned with the prisoners. The White Cloaks would be after them as soon as they discovered what was up, so a place to hide was needed. Tam knew one, an empty farmhouse on the edge of Westwood. Try not to kill anybody if you can manage it, Baron cautioned the Aiel. The White Cloaks will be hot enough at losing their prisoners. They'll set the sun afire if they lose men, too. Gaul and the maidens nodded as if they looked forward to it. Strange people. They vanished into the night. Have a care, Baron told him softly as he slung his bow across his back. ta'veren does not mean immortal. Tomas might be a help, you know. Do you think one more would make a difference? She said musingly. Besides, I have other uses for him. Shaking his head, he moved out from the thicket, going to elbows and knees, almost flat to the ground as soon as he was beyond the brush. Fail imitated him at his side. The grass and wildflowers stood high enough to screen them. He was glad she could not see his face.
I'll be right back, everyone.
Not for himself, but if anything happened to her. Like two more shifting moon shadows, they crawled across the open ground, stopping at Perrin's signal about 10 paces from where guards paced up and down, cloaks gleaming in the moonlight. A little way out from the first row of tents, two came face to face almost in front of them, stomping to a halt. All is well with the night, one announced. The light illumine us and protect us from the shadow. All is well with the night, the other replied. The light illumine us and protect us from the shadow. Turning on their heels, they marched away, looking neither left nor right. Perrin let each take a dozen paces, then touched Fail's shoulder and rose, barely letting himself breathe. He could hardly hear her breathing either. Almost tiptoeing, they hurried in among the tents, dropping low again as soon as they were past the first. Men snored inside or muttered in their sleep. Except for that, the camp was silent. The tramp of the guards' boots was plainly audible. The smell of doused cook fires hung in the air, the sense of canvas and horses and men. Silently, he motioned for Fail to follow him. Tent ropes made snares for unwary feet in the darkness. They were clear to him, though, and he knew what would pass through for them. He had the location of the prisoner's tent marked in his head, and he started toward it cautiously, near the center of the camp. A long way there and a long way back. The crunch of boots on the ground and a grunt from Fail spun him around just in time to be knocked down by the rush of a big shape in a white cloak, a man as thick as Master Luhan himself. Iron fingers dug into his throat as the two of them rolled. Perrin seized the man's chin with one hand, forcing his head back, trying to push him off. Prying at the grip on his throat, he pounded at the fellow's wrists with his fist, producing grunts and no other effect he could tell. Blood roared in his ears. His vision narrowed, black creeping in from the sides. He fumbled for his axe, but his fingers felt numb. Suddenly the man jerked and collapsed atop him. Perrin pushed the limp form off himself and drew in deep lungfuls of sweet night air. Fail tossed aside a chunk of firewood and rubbed the side of her head. He did not think I was worth worrying about, the unknocking down, she whispered. A fool, Perrin whispered back. What a strong one. He was going to have the feel of those fingers at his neck for days. Are you all right? Of course. I'm not a porcelain figurine. He supposed she was not at that. Hastily dragging the unconscious man up against the side of a tent, where he hoped no one would find him soon, he stripped off the fellow's white cloak and bound his hands and feet with spare bowstrings. A kerchief found in the fellow's pocket served for a gag. Not very clean, but that was his own fault. Lifting his bow over his head, Perrin settled the cloak around his shoulders. If anyone else saw them, maybe they would mistake him for one of their own. The cloak had a golden knot of rank beneath the flaring sunburst. An officer, even better. He walked between the tents openly now and quickly. Hidden or not, that fellow could...
All right, sorry.
The alarm raised. Fail scudded along beside him like his shadow. Camp for signs of life as alertly as he did. Shifting moon shadows obscured the spaces between the tents, even for his eyes. Approaching the prison tent, he slowed, so as not to excite the guards. A white-cloaked man stood at this end, and the gleaming lance point of another rose above the tent's peaked roof. Suddenly, that lance point vanished. There was no sound. It simply fell. A heartbeat later, two patches of darkness abruptly became veiled Aiel, neither tall enough for Gaul. Before the guard could move, one of them leaped into the air, kicking him in the face. He staggered to his knees. The other maiden spun, adding her own kick. The guard dropped bonelessly. Crouching, the maidens looked around, spears ready, to see if they had roused anyone. At the sight of Perrin in a white cloak, they nearly went for him, until they saw Fail. One shook her head and whispered to the other, who appeared to laugh silently.
Hell yeah, story.
Perrin told himself he should not feel disgruntled, but first Fail saved him from being strangled. Now she saved him from a spear through his liver. For somebody who was supposedly leading a rescue, he was making a fine showing so far. Tossing the tent flap aside, he put his head into the interior, which was even darker than outside. Master Luhan lay asleep across the tent's entrance, with the women huddled together toward the back. Perrin put a hand over Harald Luhan's mouth, and his eyes popped open, laid a finger across his own lips. "Wake the others," Perrin said in a low voice. "Quietly. We are taking you out of here." Recognition dawned in Master Luhan's eyes, and he nodded. Backing out of the tent, Perrin stripped the cloak from the downed guard. The man was still breathing, hoarsely, bubbling through a thoroughly broken nose. But being manhandled did not wake him. They had to hurry now. Gaul was there, with the cloak from the other guard. The three Aiel watched the other tents cautiously. Fail practically danced with impatience. When Master Luhan brought his wife and the other women out, all of them peering about nervously in the moonlight, Perrin hurriedly put one of the cloaks around the blacksmith. It was a poor fit. Harald Luhan seemed to be made from tree trunks, what it had to do. The other went around Alsbeth Luhan. She was not so large as her husband, but still as big as most men. Her round face looked surprised at first, but then she nodded. Pulling the fallen guard's conical helmet from his head, she stuck it on her own, squashing it down atop her thick braid. The two guards they bound and gagged with strips of blanket and laid inside the tent. Sneaking out again the way they had come in was impossible. Perrin had known that from the start. Even if Master and Mistress Luhan had moved quietly enough, which he doubted, Bode and Eldrin were clinging to each other in shocked disbelief of rescue. Only their mother's soft murmurs kept them from breaking into relieved tears already. He had planned for it. Horses were needed, both for a quick burst of speed away from the camp and to carry everyone afterward. There were horses at the picket lines. The Aiel ghosting ahead, he followed behind with Fail and the Cothins behind, Harald and Alsbeth bringing up the rear. To a casual glance at least, they looked like three white cloaks escorting four women. The picketed horses were guarded, but only on the side away from the tents. After all, why guard them from the men who rode them? It certainly made Perrin's job easier. They simply walked up to the line of horses nearest the tents, each secured by a simple rope hackamore, and untied one apiece, except for the Aiel. The hardest part was getting Mistress Luhan up barebacked. It took Perrin and Master Luhan both, and she kept trying to push her skirts down to cover her knees. Daddy and her girls scrambled up easily, and Fail, of course. The guards supposedly watching the horses continued their measured rounds, calling to each other about all being well with the night. "When I give the word," Perrin began, and someone in the camp shouted, then again more loudly. A horn sounded, and shouting poured out of the tents. Whether they had found the prisoners gone or the unconscious man who had attacked him, it made no difference. "Follow me," Perrin cried, digging his heels into the dark gelding he had chosen. "Ride!" It was a madcap rush, but he tried to keep an eye on everyone. Master Luhan was almost as bad a rider as his wife, the pair of them bouncing around, nearly falling as their horses ran. Either Bode or Eldrin was screaming at the top of her lungs from excitement or terror. Luckily, the guards were not expecting trouble from inside the camp. One white-cloaked man, peering into the darkness, turned just in time to throw himself out of the way of the charging horses with a cry almost as shrill as the Coffin Girl's. More horns bayed behind them, and shouts with the definite sound of orders hammered the night, well before they reached the cover of the thicket. Not that it was much cover now. Tam had everyone mounted, as Perrin had asked, or ordered. He swung straight from the gelding to Stepper. Perrin and Tomas were the only ones not all but jumping up and down in their saddles. Their horses were the only ones not dancing with their riders' nervousness. Abel was trying to hug his wife and daughters, all three at the same time, all of them laughing and crying. Master Lujan was trying to shake every hand he could reach. Everybody except the Aiel, Baron, and her warder, seemed to be offering everybody else congratulations, as though it were all done. "Why, Baron, it is you," Mistress Lujan exclaimed. Her round face looked peculiar under the helmet, sitting askew because of her braid. "What is this thing on your face, young man? I am more than grateful to you, but I will not have you at my table looking like a—" "No time for that," he told her, ignoring the shock on her face. She was not a woman people cut off, but the white-cloak horns were sounding something besides an alarm now. A short, repetitive cry, sharp and insistent. An order of some kind. "Tam! Abel! Take Master Lujan and the women to that hiding place you know. Gall, you go with them. And Fail." That would add Bane and Chiat. "And Hugh and Haim." That should be enough to be safe. "Move quietly. Quiet is better than speed. For a little while anyway.
Yeah.
But go now."
That's some nice pictures.
Those he named wound off westward with no argument, though Mistress
That's a
Lujan,
nice
holding
pic,
the horse's
sorry.
mane with both hands, gave him a very level look. It was the lack of argument from Fail that stunned him, enough that it took him a moment to realize he had called Master Althor and Master
Hell yeah,
Falcon
it looks
by their
good
first
too.
names. Baron and Tomas had stayed behind, and he eyed her sharply. "Any chance of a little help from you?" "Not the way you mean, perhaps," she replied calmly, as though the White Cloak camp were not in turmoil just a mile off. "My reasons are no different today than yesterday, but I think it might rain in, half an hour, maybe less. Quite a downpour, I expect." Half an hour. Perrin grunted and turned to the remaining Two Rivers lads. Practically quivering with the desire to run, they held their bows in white-knuckled grips. He hoped they had all remembered to bring spare bowstrings, at least, since it was going to rain. "We," he told them, "are going to draw the White Cloaks off so Mistress Coffin and Mistress Lujan and the rest can get away safely. We'll take them south along the North Road until we can lose them in the rain. If anyone wants out, he had best ride now." A few hands shifted on their reins, but they all sat their saddles looking at him. "Shout like you've gone mad so they'll hear us. Shout until we reach the road." Bellowing, he wheeled Stepper and galloped for the road. At first, he was not really certain they would follow, but their wild howls drowned his roar and the thunder of their hooves. If the White Cloaks did not hear that, they were deaf. Not all of them stopped shouting when they reached the hard-packed dirt of the North Road and swung south at a dead run through the night. Some laughed and whooped. Perrin shrugged out of the White Cloak and let it fall. The horns sounded again, a little fainter now. "Perrin!" Will called, leaning forward on the neck of his horse. "What do we do now? What do we do next?" "We hunt Trollocs," Perrin shouted over his shoulder. From the way the laughter redoubled, he did not think they believed him. But he could feel Baron's eyes drilling into his back. She knew. Thunder in the night sky echoed. Chapter 34. He Who Comes with the Dawn. The dawn shadows shortened and paled as Rand and Mac jogged across the barren, still dark valley floor, leaving fog-shrouded Ruidion behind. The dry air hinted at heat to come, but the slight breeze actually felt cool to Rand. That would not last. Full blistering daylight would be on them soon enough. They hurried as best they could in the hope of beating it, but he did not think they would. Their best was not very fast. Matt trotted in a pained shamble. A dark smear fanned across half his face, and his coat hung open, revealing his unlaced shirt, stuck to his chest by more drying blood. Sometimes he gingerly touched the thick wheal around his throat, nearly black now, growling under his breath, and he stumbled often, catching himself with the odd, black-hafted spear, clutching at his head. He did not complain, though, which was a bad sign. Matt was a great complainer at small discomforts. If he was silent now, it meant he was in real pain. The old half-healed wound in Rand's side felt as though something were boring into it, and the gashes on his face and head burned. Yet lumbering along, half hunched over his aching side, he hardly thought of his own hurts. He was all too conscious of the sun rising behind him, and the Aiel waiting on the bare mountainside ahead. There was water and shade up there, and help from that. The rising sun behind, and the Aiel ahead. Dawn and the Aiel. He who comes with the dawn. That Aes Sedai he had seen, or dreamed he had seen, before Rhuidean, she had spoken as if she had the foretelling. He will bind you together. He will take you back and destroy you. Words delivered like prophecy. Destroy them. Prophecy said he would break the world again. The idea horrified him. Perhaps he could escape that part at least. But war, death, and destruction already welled up in his footsteps. Tyr was the first place in what seemed a very long time where he had not left chaos behind. Men dying and villages burning. He found himself wishing he could climb on Jioden and run as fast as the stallion could carry him. It was not the first time. But I can't run, he thought. I have to do it because there isn't anybody else who can. I do it when the Dark One wins. A hard bargain, but the only one there was. Why would I destroy the Aiel? How? That last thought chilled him. It was too much like accepting that he would, that he should. He did not want to harm the Aiel. Light, he said harshly. I don't want to destroy anybody. His mouth felt lined with dust again. Said silently, a wary look. I'm not mad yet. Up slope, the Aiel were stirring. The cold fact needed them. That was why he had begun to contemplate this, back when he first discovered that the dragon reborn, and he who comes with the dawn, might well be one and the same. He needed people he could trust, people who followed from something besides him, or greed for power, people who did not mean to use him for their own ends. He had done what was required, and now he would use them. Because he had to. He was not mad yet. He did not think he was, but many would think so before he was done. Full glaring sunlight overtook them before they began to scramble up Jayandare, like a club. Rand climbed the uneven slope as fast as he could manage, with its dips and rises and rough outcrops. His throat had forgotten its last drink. The sun dried his shirt as fast as sweat could moisten it. That needed higher. There was water up there. Bear stood in front of the Wise One's low tents, a water bag in her hands, glistening with condensation. Licking cracked lips, Rand was sure he could see the glisten. Where is he? What have you done to him? The roar stopped Rand in his tracks. The flame-haired man, Couladin, stood atop a thick thumb of granite jutting out from the mountain. Others of the Shaido clan clustered around its base, all looking at Rand and Matt. Some were veiled. Who are you talking about? Rand called back. His voice croaked with thirst. Couladin's eyes bulged in outrage. Muradin, wetlander! He entered 2 days before you, yet you come out first. He could not fail where you survive. You must have murdered him. Rand thought he heard a shout from the Wise One's tents, but before he could even blink, Couladin uncoiled like a snake, casting his spear straight at him. 2 more streaked behind it from the Aiel at the base of the granite thumb. Instinctively, Rand snatched for Saidin and the flame-carved sword. The blade whirled in his hands. Whirlwind on the Mountain, aptly named, slicing a pair of spear shafts in 2. Mat's spinning black spear just barely knocked the third aside. Proof! Couladin howled. They entered Rhuidean armed. It is forbidden. Look at the blood on them. They have murdered Muradin. Even as he spoke, he hurled another spear. And this time, it was one of a dozen. Rand flung himself aside, just conscious of Mat leaping the other way. Yet even before they hit the ground, the spears came together where Rand had been standing, bouncing off each other. Rolling to his feet, he found the spears all stuck into the stony ground, in a perfect circle surrounding the spot he had jumped from. For a moment, even Couladin seemed stunned to stillness. Stop! Bear shouted, running for an instant. Her long, bulky skirt impeded her no more than her age. She bounded down the slope like a girl for all her white hair, and a girl in a fury at that. The piece of Rhuidean, Couladin! Her thin voice was an iron rod. Twice you have tried to break it now. Once more, and you are outlawed. My word on it. You, and anyone else who lifts a hand. She skidded to a halt in front of Rand, facing the Shaido, with the water bag raised as if she meant to bludgeon him with it. Let who doubts me raise a weapon. That one will be deprived of shade according to the agreement of Rhuidean. Denied hold or stand or tent. His own set will hunt him as a wild beast. Some of the Shaido hastily unveiled their faces. Some of them. But Couladin was not dissuaded. They are armed, Bear. They went armed to Rhuidean. That is, silence! Bear shook a fist at him. You dare speak of weapons? You who would break the peace of Rhuidean? And kill with your face bare to the world? They took no weapon with them. I attest to it. Deliberately, she turned her back, but the gaze she swept across Rand and Mat was hardly softer than what she had given Couladin. She grimaced at Mat's strange, sword-bladed spear, muttering, Did you find that in Rhuidean, boy? I was given it, old woman, Mat growled back hoarsely. I paid for it, and I mean to keep it. She sniffed. You both look as if you had rolled in knife grass. What? No, you can tell me later. Eyeing Rand's power-wrought sword, she shivered. Rid yourself of that, and show them the signs before that fool Couladin tries to whip them up again. With this temper on him, he would take his whole clan into outlawry without blinking. Quickly! For a moment, he gaped at her. Signs? Then he remembered what Rhuarc had shown him once. The mark of a man who had survived Rhuidean. Letting the sword vanish, he unlaced his left shirt cuff and pushed the sleeve back to his elbow. Around his forearm wound a shape like that on the dragon banner. A sinuous, golden-maned form, scaled in scarlet and gold. He expected it, of course, but it was still a shock. The thing looked like a part of his skin, as though that non-existent creature itself had settled into him. His arm felt no different, yet the scales sparkled in the sunlight. It seemed if he touched that golden mane atop his wrist, he would surely feel each hair. He thrust his arm into the air as soon as it was bare. High, so Couladin and his people could see. Mutters rose among the Shaido, and Couladin snarled wordlessly. The numbers around the granite outcrop were swelling as more Shaido came running from their tents. Rhuarc stood with Hiern and his Jindo a little upslope. They watched the Shaido warily, and Rand, with an air of expectation, his uplifted arm did not lessen. Land stood halfway between the two groups, hands resting on his sword hilt, face a thunderhead. Just as Rand began to realize the Aiel wanted something more, Egwene and the other three wise women reached him, scrambling down the mountain. The Aiel women looked out of countenance at having to hurry, and every bit as angry as Bear had been. Amis directed her glares at Couladin, while sun-haired Melaine stared blamingly at Rand. Siana just seemed ready to chew rocks. Egwene, with a scarf wrapped around her hair and spread over her shoulders, stared at Mat and him, half in consternation and half as though she had expected never to see them again. "Oh, man," Bear muttered. "All of the signs." Tossing the water bag to Mat, she seized Rand's right arm and stripped back his sleeve, exposing a mirror twin of the creature on his left forearm. Her breath caught, then came out in a long sigh. She seemed balanced on a razor edge between relief and apprehension. There was no mistaking it. She had hoped for the second marking, yet it made her afraid. Amis and the other two wise women echoed her sign almost exactly. It was odd to see Aiel fearful. Rand almost laughed. Not that he was amused. Twice and twice shall he be marked. That was what the prophecies of the dragon said. A heron branded into each palm, and now these. One of the peculiar creatures, dragons, the prophecy called them, was supposed to be for remembrance lost. Rudian had certainly supplied the lost history of the Aiel's origins. And the other was for the price he must pay. How soon must I pay it, he wondered. And how many have to pay with me? Others always had to, even when he tried to pay alone. Apprehensive or not, Bear did not pause before shoving that arm above his head too, and proclaiming loudly, "Behold what has never been seen before! Akar Karn has been chosen, a chief of chiefs. Born of a maiden, he has come with the dawn from Rhuidean, according to prophecy, to unite the Aiel. The fulfillment of prophecy has begun." The reactions of the other Aiel were nothing like what Rand envisioned. Couladin stared down at him, even more hatefully than before, if that was possible, then leaped from the outcrop and stalked up the slope to vanish into the Shaido tents. The Shaido themselves began to disperse, glancing at Rand with unreadable faces before drifting back to their tents. Iron and the warriors of the Jindo Sept, hardly hesitating, did the same. In moments, only Ruark remained, his eyes troubled. Lan went over to the clan chief. From his face, the warder would just as soon not have seen Rand at all. Rand was not sure what he had expected, but surely something other than this. "Burn me," Mat muttered. He seemed to realize for the first time that he had the water bag in his hands. Jerking the plug free, he held it high, letting nearly as much splash over his face as into his mouth. When he finally lowered it, he looked at the markings on Rand's arms again and shook his head, repeating, "Burn me," as he pushed the sloshing bag at him. Rand stared at the Aiel in consternation, but he was more than glad to drink. The first gulps hurt his throat, it was so dry. "What happened to you?" Egwene demanded. "Did Muradin attack you?" "It is forbidden to speak of what occurs in Rhuidean," Bear said sharply. "Not Muradin," Rand said. "Where's Moraine? I expected her to be the first to meet us." He rubbed his face. Black flakes of dried blood came off on his hand. "For once I won't care if she asks before she heals me." "Me either," Mat said hoarsely. He swayed, holding himself up with his spear, and pressed the heel of his palm against his forehead. "My brain is spinning." Egwene grimaced. "She is still in Rhuidean, I suppose." "But if you have planned to come out, maybe she will. She left right after you. And Avienda. You've all been gone so long." "Moraine went to Rhuidean," Rand said incredulously. "And Avienda? Why did—" Abruptly he registered what else she had said. What do you mean, so long? This is the 7th day, she said. The 7th day.
Hey,
since you all
Enforcer,
went
how
down
you
to the
doing,
lake.
bro?
The water bag fell from his hands. Sienna snatched it up again before more than a little of its contents, so precious in the waste, it trickled
Hope
away
you're starting
down
to
the
feel
stony
better,
slope.
Enforcer.
Rand barely noticed. 7 days. Anything could have happened in 7 days. They could be catching up to me, figuring out what I'm planning. I have to move fast. I have to keep ahead of them. I haven't come this far to fail. They were all staring at him, even Rourke and Matt.
Oh, yeah, that's
Concern
good to
writ
hear,
large on
bro.
their faces, and caution. No wonder in that. Who could say what he might do, or how sane he still was? Only Land did not change his stony skull. I told you that was Alienda, Rand. There she was born. Matt's voice had a painful rasp to it, and his legs looked none too steady. How long before Moraine comes back? Rand asked. If she had gone in at the same time, she should return soon. If she has not returned by the 10th day, Bear replied, she will not.
Oh,
No
what
one has ever
happened?
returned after 10 days. Another 3 days, maybe.
Okay.
3 more days when he had a Let this come now. I will not fail.
What the hell?
He barely kept a snarl from his face. You can channel. One of you can, anyway. I saw you flung fluid in about. Will you heal Matt? Amis and Mullane exchanged looks he could only call rueful. Our paths have gone other ways, Amis said regretfully. There are wise ones who could do it, but we are not among them. What do you mean? He snapped angrily. You can channel like that. Why can't you heal like that? You do not want him to go in the first place. Do you think you can let him die from it? I'll survive, Matt said. But his eyes were tight with suffering. Egwene put a hand on Rand's arm. Not all Aes Sedai can heal very well, she said in a soothing voice. The best healers are Shiriel, the mistress of novices, cannot heal anything much more serious than a bruise or a small cut. No 2 women can have exactly the same talents or skills.
What the hell?
Her tone irritated him.
I'm not sure what's going
He was not
on,
some pettish
everyone.
child to be smoothed down. He frowned at the wise ones. Could not or would not.
Yeah,
He
I'm
would
not
have to
sure
wait
what's
for
going on, but
If she had not been killed by that bubble of evil,
I'm gonna call into this life for right now,
it must have dissipated by now.
just
There had
cause.
been an end to 1 and 2.
Yeah, I keep losing connection. It seems
They
like
wouldn't have stopped her. She could
But-
channel her way through them.
no one thank everyone for stopping by, and
She doesn't
everyone who
have to
keeps
figure
coming
out
back
each
by.
at a time the way I do. But then why was she not back? Why had she gone in the first place? And why had he not seen her? Foolish question. 100 people could have been in Rudion without being seen. Too many questions
Maybe.
and no answers until she did return, he suspected. If then. There are herbs and ointments, Sienna said.
Okay,
Come out of the sun, and we will tend your
there it goes
injuries.
again.
Out of
But-
the sun.
Until next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe out there.
He was being boorish, but he